There's a certain ache that comes with being alone. Not the kind of pain you feel in your body, but a deeper ache. The kind that sits in your chest and whispers in the back of your mind. It doesn't feel natural. In fact, it feels like someone messed with the rules of life. We're born into a world filled with people, overflowing with voices, movement, laughter, connection. So, why does it feel like life quietly turned its back on you? You look around and think, everyone has someone. Everyone has somewhere to go. Everyone belongs somewhere. Except me. And that quiet, that silence that once felt peaceful, suddenly becomes heavy. It presses on your chest. It becomes a weight that sits in every hour, every breath. And eventually, a question rises. A question you may have never said out loud, but have felt in your bones. Why me? But what if I told you, this isn't a punishment? What if being alone, truly alone, isn't a glitch in life, but a chapter you were always meant to go through? Not a tragedy, not a cosmic mistake, but a turning point. One of the greatest psychologists in history, Carl Jung, didn't see solitude as something to fear. He didn't see it as a sign that you've failed or that life has abandoned you. To Jung, solitude was sacred, a necessary stage in becoming who you're meant to be, a doorway into the deepest parts of yourself, parts you can't hear when the world is loud. We often mistake solitude for abandonment. We imagine everyone else is thriving, building friendships, building love, building life, while we sit quietly on the sidelines, forgotten. But Jung saw something different. People who are called to a deeper purpose often walk alone. Not because they are unworthy, but because the noise of the world would drown out the transformation happening inside them. Most people think loneliness is failure, like it means you didn't win at life. But spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, sometimes solitude is exactly what you need. It's not life rejecting you. It's life preparing you. Think about the ones who changed the world. The thinkers, the creators, the spiritual leaders. They didn't find themselves in crowds. They didn't transform while surrounded by applause and attention. Buddha sat alone beneath the Bodhi tree. Jesus walked alone in the desert. And Jung himself retreated into deep reflection, filling the Red Book with visions, dreams, and raw inner truth. Solitude wasn't escape. It was confrontation. Not with the world, but with themselves. Why? Because real transformation rarely happens when you're comfortable. Growth doesn't bloom in distractions. You don't evolve while surrounded by noise. Real change happens in the quiet, in discomfort, when you face who you think you are versus who you truly are underneath it all. So, if you're experiencing a season of isolation, if life has suddenly become quiet, if the world feels distant, maybe, just maybe, you're being prepared. Prepared for a chapter that only solitude can begin. But here's the hard truth. Most people don't make it through this stage. They don't stay long enough to understand its meaning. They panic. They numb the silence. They run back to distraction. They fear that loneliness means forever. And it's that belief, not the solitude, that breaks them. Because solitude isn't what destroys people. Hopelessness is. Jung believed solitude is not a curse. It's a mirror. It shows you your real self, your wounds, your fears, your suppressed dreams, your shadow, the parts of you you've pushed away. And that's terrifying. That's why most escape the moment silence begins to speak. Think about it. The second silence gets uncomfortable. What do most people reach for? Their phones, a new conversation, noise, entertainment, a relationship. Even one they know isn't right. Anything to avoid hearing themselves. But those who stay, those who sit in the quiet and face what rises, they begin a journey Jung called individuation, becoming whole, becoming authentic, becoming you. Not who society told you to be, not who your parents needed you to be, not the version that earns approval, but the version buried underneath all that noise. Solitude strips away everything false. And yes, at first, it hurts. Because suddenly you realize, maybe the life you built wasn't really yours. Maybe the person you've been wasn't your true self. Maybe you've been performing. Maybe you've been surviving, not living. In solitude, your subconscious finally speaks. Whispers become echoes. Echoes become truths. And truth, real truth, doesn't always feel gentle. It burns. It confronts. It strips away illusions. But that burning, that discomfort, that ache, it's not destruction. It's purification, and yet many waste this gift. Instead of listening, they fear it. Instead of growing, they cling to distraction. They turn solitude into bitterness, resentment, victimhood. Jung warned, do not build your identity around pain. Pain is a teacher, not a home. When you fight silence, it controls you. When you embrace it, it frees you. Those who emerge from solitude stronger didn't conquer it. They surrendered to it. They let it strip away what never belonged. They let it burn away what was false. They let it carve them into someone new. That's why Jung saw isolation as sacred, a threshold, a furnace, a rite of passage. Not everyone crosses it, but those who do never return to who they were before. Because in solitude, you enter a psychological wilderness. No guide, no applause, no map, just you. And that's the point, to hear yourself again, to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And if you can face that silence, if you can sit with the discomfort instead of running from it, you'll begin to hear a voice you forgot you had, your true self. When the distractions fade, the feeds, the conversations, the constant noise, you're left face to face with the one person you can't escape, yourself. And that's when things start to get loud. Your mind, once drowned by the noise of the world, suddenly turns up the volume. All the thoughts you've buried, all the feelings you've ignored start rising like ghosts from the depths. Insecurities whisper first. Then come the regrets, the what-ifs, the should-haves, the if-onlys. And eventually, the things you've been running from your whole life stand right in front of you. This is where most people run. They reach for their phones. They fall into new distractions. They chase new people. Anything to escape the discomfort of being with themselves. But those who stay, those who choose not to run, they begin the sacred process Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming whole. To individuate means to become fully yourself. Not the mask, not the version sculpted by expectations, but the authentic soul beneath it all. In this process, it's not gentle, it's not polished, it's raw. It demands honesty, brutal honesty, because you have to look at yourself without filters, without excuses. Most people live as fragments of themselves, pieces molded by family, by society, by fear. They carry borrowed identities, like wearing clothes that never quite fit. But solitude tears all that away. It leaves you naked in front of your truth. And that's what makes it so painful. Because suddenly, there's nowhere to hide. Maybe the job you've been holding on to doesn't align with who you are. Maybe the relationship you're clinging to is built on fear, not love. Maybe the dreams you're chasing belong to someone else's idea of success. Without the noise of the world, your subconscious begins to speak clearly, first in whispers, then in demands. It's not punishment, it's purification. Solitude burns away illusion. It clears the fog. It strips everything down until all that remains is the truth. And that's when something begins to grow, quietly, painfully, beautifully. A new you. But not everyone embraces it. Many see solitude as failure. They tell themselves, if I were enough, I wouldn't be alone. So they rush to escape the silence, not realizing it's the silence itself that holds the key. They waste this sacred opportunity by trying to outrun it. They avoid the very process designed to make them whole. Jung warned about this too. Don't identify with your suffering. Don't make pain your identity. Pain is the path, not the destination. You are supposed to learn from pain, not live inside it. When you resist silence, it controls you. When you lean into it, you reclaim your power. Because somewhere in the stillness, beneath the fear and the ache, you start hearing a voice that's been waiting patiently your whole life. Your real voice. The ones who emerge from solitude, wiser, grounded, unshakable, aren't the ones who fought it. They're the ones who surrendered, who allowed the silence to teach them, who listened instead of escaping. They used the solitude to remember who they were before the world taught them to forget. That's why isolation, though it feels like emptiness, is really a threshold, a rite of passage. It's the universe whispering, come home, it's time. Because solitude isn't empty. It's full of truth, full of healing, full of potential. When you are alone, truly alone, you enter a kind of wilderness. No guide, no applause, no direction, just you and the unknown. And yes, it's terrifying, but that's where the old self dies, and the real self begins to breathe. Solitude strips away the external voices so you can finally hear your own. It forces you to ask the questions that actually matter. Who am I beyond my roles? What do I believe when no one is watching? What do I want? Not to impress others, but to live with meaning. Jung believed that when we remove external influence, the unconscious, the hidden world of our desires, fears, instincts, and forgotten truths, finally has room to speak. And it doesn't speak in words. It speaks in feelings, in dreams, in flashes of insight that seem to come from nowhere. But they're not random. They're messages from you to you. In a world that glorifies busyness, stillness feels rebellious. We're told to keep moving, keep producing, keep achieving, but transformation requires the opposite. Stillness, stopping long enough to feel, to listen, even when what you hear scares you. This is what Jung called the alchemy of solitude, the process of turning silence into selfhood. It doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, like watching a seed push through soil. First darkness, then pressure, then growth. And just like the seed, it needs cooperation. If you fight it, if you numb it, if you run from it, transformation stops. You remain stuck, repeating patterns, playing the same roles, wearing the same masks. That's where Jung's concept of shadow work comes in. Your shadow is everything you've pushed away. Your anger, your envy, your guilt, your shame. They don't disappear. They just wait in the dark. And when you step into solitude, the shadow steps forward. You'll feel it. The sadness you've buried. The fear you've ignored. It's overwhelming. But Jung taught that integration, not denial, is the path to wholeness. The moment you stop fighting those parts, the moment you look at them with honesty and compassion, they stop controlling you. They become allies, messengers, teachers. That's what solitude does. It gives you space to meet your shadow and to finally accept it as part of who you are. Because real peace doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from understanding it. When you can sit with your pain, not flinch from it, not bury it, not rush to fix it, it loses its power over you, and something amazing happens. Clarity. You start to see your life for what it really is. You notice which relationships drain you. You recognize how often you abandon yourself just to be accepted. You realize how much of your life has been performance and how little has been truth. And with that clarity comes reclamation. You begin to reclaim your life, not the one others wanted for you, but the one that's authentically yours. That's the freedom solitude offers. It doesn't promise comfort, it promises truth. And truth, once found, changes everything. In this quiet space of solitude, something begins to shift. You start to remember who you were before the world got loud. You rediscover the passions that once lit you up, the ones you silenced because they weren't practical. You begin to hear your inner child again. Not the wounded one, but the curious, creative, fearless one. And maybe, for the first time in years, you start to feel alive again. Because solitude doesn't just give you silence. It gives you clarity. You start to see how much of your life has been built around what others expected from you. You start to see how often you've traded authenticity for acceptance, depth for comfort, truth for approval. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to living half alive. That's why solitude, though uncomfortable, is sacred. It gives you the rare chance to reclaim your soul. But here's the tragedy. Most people never do. They stay busy. They avoid the silence. They skim the surface of their own lives, mistaking noise for meaning. They confuse being seen with being known. And in doing so, they miss the treasure buried just beneath their loneliness. If life has brought you into solitude, even unwillingly, consider that it may be offering you truth, not punishment. Truth isn't soft. It doesn't comfort. It cuts. It cleanses. It exposes what no longer fits. But once the cutting is done, you're lighter, freer, more yourself than you've ever been. Because the people who emerge from solitude really emerge, radiate something different. Their strength is quiet. Their presence feels rooted. They don't need validation because they've learned how to validate themselves. They're not chasing attention because they've made peace with being unseen. They don't fear misunderstanding because they've learned that being authentic matters more than being approved. That's the gift of solitude. It gives you back to yourself. But it's not a gift that's handed to you. It's one you earn. You earn it by surviving the nights that feel endless, by sitting with the ache that feels unbearable, by facing every thought, every shadow, every fear that rises in the silence. And then one day, not with fireworks, not with fanfare, but quietly, something changes. The silence that once felt suffocating begins to feel sacred. The loneliness that used to hurt begins to feel peaceful. You realize you've made it through the fire, and you're still here. Not just surviving, but awake. But now comes the real test, returning to the world. Most think the end of solitude is the end of transformation. That once you've faced yourself, you go back to life as before. But that's not how it works. You don't return as the same person. The world you left behind feels different because you're different. This is where Jung's insight becomes powerful again. He believed individuation, the process of becoming your whole, authentic self, isn't complete until you bring that new self back into the world. Transformation that stays private isn't transformation. It has to be lived. And that's hard, because when you change, your old world doesn't always welcome it. The things that once excited you now feel hollow. The relationships that once fit now feel forced. Your values shift. Your priorities deepen. You start craving authenticity over approval, depth over attention, meaning over comfort. At first, it's disorienting. You may feel like a stranger in your own life. Some people will celebrate your change. Others will resist it. But you have to remember, your growth is real, and it matters. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that you've outgrown. Returning from solitude isn't about blending back in. It's about showing up differently, fully, honestly, quietly powerful. You start to speak less, but with more meaning. You stop chasing connection and start cultivating it. You stop saying yes out of fear and start saying no out of self-respect. You stop abandoning yourself just to belong. You become your own anchor. And that inner strength, it doesn't need to be loud. People can feel it. They sense it in your stillness, in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. And slowly, the outer world starts to realign. You begin to attract relationships that feel honest, not performative. Opportunities that feel aligned, not forced. Life begins to meet you where you are, because you've stopped pretending to be where you're not. And when challenges come, you face them differently. You don't crumble. You return inward, because now you know the way home, back to yourself. That's what solitude teaches, how to be your own home. Rejection stings less. Failure feels more like feedback than judgment. Silence stops being scary. because you've learned how to listen inside it. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this whole journey is what you now carry with you. Presence. In a world addicted to noise, speed, and distraction, someone who has walked through solitude carries a rare kind of calm. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not chasing validation. You're not performing. You've found something deeper, peace. And that peace becomes a gift. Without even trying, you start to help others. You listen differently. You hold space instead of offering fixes. You don't preach what you've learned. You embody it. Your stillness becomes medicine. Your authenticity becomes light. And your presence becomes permission for others to pause, to reflect, to heal. That's how solitude becomes service. Not by escaping the world, but by re-entering it with wholeness. And still, you return to solitude often. Not out of loneliness, but out of reverence. Because you understand now, solitude isn't exile. It's sanctuary, a place to realign, to listen, to remember. Growth never ends. There will always be new shadows to face, new layers to shed, but now you know. Silence isn't the enemy. It's the teacher. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. And now, you are awake, not in the dramatic way movies show it, but in the quiet, grounded way that changes everything. You know what peace feels like because you built it. You know what self-respect feels like because you earned it. And you know that you can stand alone, not because you have to, but because you can. You walk differently now. Not separate from the world, but not consumed by it either. You carry your solitude with you, not as a wound, but as wisdom. You belong to yourself now, and from that place, everything changes. Because the real gift of solitude isn't escape, it's embodiment. It's remembering that you were never broken, never behind, never forgotten. You were simply being carved into something deeper. And now, you are ready. Not to return to who you were, but to step forward as who you've become.